Okay, listen to this comment I just read. Dividends aren't free money. You dividend investors literally can't do simple math.
Ouch. But, I mean, they're kinda not wrong.
Wait, what? Are you siding with the internet trolls right now?
No, let me back up for a second. Look, this is probably the most toxic debate in investing right now. People think if a company pays you a dividend, they're basically just taking money out of your left pocket and stuffing it into your right.
Right, the whole it comes out of the stock price argument, which always makes me wonder if that's true, why does anyone even bother?
Exactly, and that is exactly what we're going to tear apart today. Because what these math geniuses failed to realize is that, well, investing for your family's future is way bigger than a high school algebra equation.
I'm Lynn.
And I'm Frank. Welcome to Talk and Wonder. We create easy-to-understand whiteboard animations covering family finance, investing, passive income, and debt management.
Our goal is to break down complex financial topics, help you avoid traps, and build wealth together. If you want to secure your future, you are exactly in the right place. So, Frank, let's do the math first. Explain this left pocket, right pocket thing.
Right, so we understand the argument. Let's start with the classic dividends aren't free money. Imagine you own a stock, and it's trading at, say, $100.
Okay, I have my $100 stock.
And on October 1st, they announce, hey, we made $5 in excess cash per share.
Nice. I assume I want all $5.
You do, but they don't give it to you. They plan to keep $1 in retained earnings to use for future business growth.
Okay, fair. So what happens to the other 4?
They decide they'll distribute that additional $4 per share as a dividend to anyone who owns the stock on, let's say, October 11th.
Right, the deadline.
Yeah, but here is where it gets tricky. It takes 2 to 3 days for stock transactions to actually clear. So the real cutoff, what they call the ex-dividend date, is October 9th.
Meaning I have to buy it by the end of October 8th.
Exactly. If you buy it on October 8th, the stock should trade for about $105. That breaks down to future earnings being worth $100 in new retained earnings.
And the $4 dividend that has my name on it.
Exactly. But then October 9th hits, the stock goes ex-dividend.
Meaning new buyers don't get the dividend anymore.
Right, and nobody is going to pay a premium for a dividend they're not going to receive, so the stock drops.
To $101.
Boom, yes, the future earnings are still $100, they still have that $1 of retained earnings, but the $4 in cash, it literally just left the company's bank account.
Okay, so I need a second. Processing. The internet troll is actually right. The stock price practically dropped the exact amount of the dividend. It is absolutely not free money.
It's not. It's the earnings that the company generated, and they are just giving it back to its shareholders. But, and this is a massive but,
I knew there was a but.
that is not the whole story, because the main difference between a company that pays a dividend and one that doesn't, it all comes down to control. It's about who actually gets to decide. It all comes down to control. It's about who actually gets to decide
How to spend my money.
exactly your slice of the company profits. So let's go back to Company A. They gave you that $4 per share.
Which I am holding right now.
Right. Now you can do whatever you want with it. If we need it for, I don't know, to pay the mortgage or use it as income, we can. If we want to reinvest in a completely different opportunity, we can do that too. Or we just buy more of Company A.
Yeah, but wait, I have to pay tax on that dividend, right? Because that's the other thing people always scream about in the comments.
You do, obviously, you pay tax, but tax is, look, think of it as the price you pay for flexibility. You are buying the option to use those profits however your family needs them right now.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about Company B, the one that doesn't pay a dividend?
So Company B keeps the full $5 in the business. They say it's for future growth prospects.
Which sounds great on paper.
Right. And because you're a shareholder, you still have a claim on those profits. But, and this is the key, you are entirely trusting the management team to make good decisions with your money.
Meaning they could completely blow it.
Well, they usually try not to, but a lot of times, instead of giving you the cash or investing in a new factory, they do share buybacks. They just buy their own stock off the market.
Which everybody loves, right? Because if they do buybacks, I don't get taxed.
True, you generally don't pay taxes on that, but again, share buybacks are basically a version of the company making the investment decision for you. And in case anyone thinks buybacks are always this magic, perfect tool, they're not. It completely depends on the price they pay.
Give me an example. Who messed this up?
Okay, let's talk about Facebook, or, well, Meta in 2021.
Oh, God, the metaverse era.
Yep. Between April 2021 and January 2022, they did about, I think it was $40 billion worth of share buybacks.
40 billion with a B.
With a B. By far their largest amount of buybacks in a three-quarter span ever. And they bought those shares back at prices between like $300 to $335 per share.
Okay.
Just to watch the stock absolutely tank. It dipped all the way down to $90 per share within the next year.
Frank, stop. Are you serious right now? From 335 to 90?
I wish I was making it up. They took $40 billion of shareholder money, your money, bought at the absolute peak, and watched it evaporate. Oh, and it's not just tech companies. Dollar General did the exact same thing recently.
The dollar store?
Yeah, they bought back shares in the $200 to $250 range. Less than a year later, the stock dipped to $109.
Wow. Okay, so that is literally like giving our family savings to, I don't know, your brother, trusting him to invest in crypto at the absolute peak and just watching it burn.
Hey, let's keep my brother out of this. But yeah, the logic is impeccable. You nailed it.
Impeccable.
So, there's nothing that's always good or always better. It really just depends. Do you want the company to allocate your profits for you blindly? Or do you want the cash in your hand to do it yourself?
I mean, after the $40 billion bonfire, I will take the cash myself. Thank you very much. But what about the other argument?
Which one?
The growth thing, because people always say if a company is paying dividends, it basically means they
have no more good ideas for growth.
Exactly. Like they've given up on innovating, so they're just handing cash back because they are old, slow, and boring.
Right. The growth investors will say, look, they're giving cash back, which means they're going to grow slower and have a lower return over time. And honestly, if investing was done in a vacuum, I would probably agree with that.
But I'm guessing we don't live in a vacuum.
We definitely don't. And things are never equal between companies. I mean, let's look at the extreme end of amazing growth ideas. Think about our neighbor who bought Peloton back in, July 2021?
Oh, God. Please tell me you're not going to bring up the $3,000 laundry rag.
I have to, because back then they were trading at $125 a share. They just announced this incredible growth, over 2x year over year. Everyone thought all those growth prospects were absolutely worth it.
And today?
Less than $5 a share. A company that never made a profit basically just burned everyone's money in the name of growth.
Just brutal. But to be fair, Frank, that's kind of cherry picking, isn't it? Like, what about the real tech giants?
Oh, totally. I know I'm cherry picking an extreme example. The reality is way more nuanced because you have companies like Google, Amazon, obviously Berkshire Hathaway.
The untouchables.
Right. They never pay a dividend. They reinvest their profits, they do buybacks, and they've had insane success. But it heavily depends on your exact timeline.
Okay, show me the numbers.
Let's take the total return of the past 5 years, and we'll look at 5 companies: Google, Amazon, Berkshire Hathaway, McDonald's, and Starbucks.
Okay, 2 boring dividend payers and 3 monsters.
Out of the 5, Google had the best return, 115%.
Shocking. So who's second? Amazon?
Nope. The next 2 best performers were the dividend payers, McDonald's at 80.86% and Starbucks at 77.09%.
Wait, are you serious right now? McDonald's, the people who literally cannot keep their ice cream machines working, beat Amazon?
Yes, Over that 5-year span, both McDonald's and Starbucks outpaced the total return of Berkshire Hathaway and Amazon.
Okay, I need a second because the narrative is always tech is the only way to build wealth.
Which is why we need to look at the actual data. Just because a company retains earnings and has this grand plan for growth, it doesn't mean it's actually going to materialize into a higher stock price.
Sometimes just having a solid business that sells coffee and burgers and generates cash.
Consistently generates cash.
Right, sometimes that just gives you a better overall return without the heart attacks.
Exactly. But, the growth guys have another argument. They'll say, well, dividends are unnecessary anyway, because if I invest in growth and I need cash to pay for my kids' braces or whatever,
I can just sell some of my shares.
right, I'll just sell shares whenever I need cash.
Which, technically is true, isn't it? If the stock is up, I just sell a piece of it. Why do I need them to hand me a dividend?
It is technically true, but what it means is that you are now completely susceptible to market timing. Think about it. If you need that cash and the market happens to be down 20% that month, you are forced to sell your shares at a huge discount just to pay for those braces.
Which is literally the opposite of what you're supposed to do. Buy low, sell high, right? Not sell low because my kid needs orthodontics.
Exactly. When you rely on selling shares, your family's cash flow is held hostage by the current stock price. But with dividend stocks, you can actually plan. The share price might drop, but the cash flow coming in usually stays steady or even grows.
You get the paycheck without having to sell the cow.
Right, the business owner mindset. You own a piece of Starbucks, they pay you your cut of the coffee sales, and you keep your shares. But I have to be fair here. If we zoom out and look at the whole picture, like the really long term, the growth guys do have a massive point.
Wait, are we switching sides again?
Look at the data. If you compare general index funds over a 25-year period, say Vanguard's Growth Index versus their Dividend Depreciation ETF, there is no question the growth fund crushed it, like 11.3% annual return compared to 9% for the dividend fund.
Okay, so 11.3 versus 9. That is a huge difference when you compound it over 25 years. So growth is better?
Well, yes and no. You have to ask why it performed so well. Over that specific 25-year period, we were basically living in a macroeconomic cheat code.
A cheat code?
Out of those 26 years of data, the federal funds rate was higher than 0.5% for only 4 or 5 years.
Wait, meaning money was basically free to borrow for like 2 decades?
Exactly. And in an environment with 0% interest, growth companies can borrow infinitely to expand, and their stocks just explode. But it comes with a massive hidden cost to the investor.
Which is?
Your sanity.
Okay, elaborate on my sanity.
There was a recent study showing 66% of investors have made an impulsive, emotionally charged investing decision that they later regretted because growth stocks, they have wild, violently huge price swings. Let's go back to our favorite example, Meta.
Oh no, the $40 billion bonfire guys.
Right. Let's say you bought it 5 years ago at around $166 a share. You look at it today at $298 and you say, hey, I made an 80% return. I'm an investing genius.
Which sounds amazing. I would brag about that.
Right? But what you don't realize is the absolute heart attack you had to survive to get there. Because a year and a half after you bought it at 166, it dropped to 153. So you are negative on your investment.
Okay, stressful, but I can hold.
Good, because a year and a half later, it shoots up to 380. You more than doubled your money.
We are buying a boat, Frank.
But you don't sell because it's going to the moon. And then, just 1 year later, it crashes to $90 a share.
Wait, from 380 down to 90? I would vomit. I would literally open my brokerage app and throw up.
After 4 years of holding, you were down 46% on your initial investment. That is the reality of growth investing. It's easy to look at a 5-year chart today and say, oh yeah, I definitely would have held.
But nobody holds when half their net worth evaporates in 12 months. They panic sell at 90 because they're terrified it's going to zero.
Exactly. You just hit the nail on the head. And this is exactly where dividend investing saves you from yourself. Because, think about it.
You're still getting the check in the mail.
Exactly. It's not that dividend stocks don't have price swings. They absolutely do. But the advantage is you are getting a consistent and usually growing payout.
So even if the stock price is completely burning down around me,
Your actual income stream is steadily growing over time. It completely changes your mindset. You're way less likely to overreact and sell at the absolute bottom just because of some temporary panic in the news.
okay, so it's basically like a built-in anxiety medication for your portfolio.
Literally, it helps you sleep at night. But the crazy thing is, we don't actually have to choose one over the other.
Wait, you mean I don't have to pick a side in the internet comment wars?
No. I am a huge fan of mixing these ideas for the best results. Because, look, if you have a 30-year timeline, you probably should have exposure to growth stocks.
But safely, like locked away somewhere where I can't touch it when I panic.
Yes, put it in your retirement account, an index fund in your 401k or IRA. You just keep adding to it, you don't look at the daily price swings, and you don't mess with it.
Out of sight, out of mind, so I don't throw up when it drops 40%.
Right. And then you build a portfolio of dividend payers as a nice complement to that, because the dividend side focuses your mind on the present. It shows you, incremental progress as you go.
It makes it real. You actually see the cash hitting your account every quarter.
Exactly, because it's not meant to give you the absolute highest, mathematically perfect return you ever could have gotten. It's meant to slowly, reliably build an income stream.
Which is what family finance is actually about. At the end of the day, we aren't trying to win a math competition against some guy on the internet. We just want to make sure our bills are paid, our kids are secure, and we can actually sleep at night.
Which is ultimately the reason we are doing any of this in the first place.
So what do you guys think? Are we totally off base with how we look at dividend investing?
Or are you still team growth only? Let us know down in the comments. We genuinely read all of them.
Oh, but Frank, if people actually want to start building that dividend income stream, how do we actually pick the companies that aren't going to go bankrupt?
Yeah, that is a completely different rabbit hole. We should probably do a deep dive on our screening process next time because